Welcome to The Long Road to Publishing, the podcast where we hear from authors who have traveled a long and bumpy road to publishing their books. Whether you're just starting out on your own writing and publishing journey, or if you're all too aware of the many possible detours, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eva Langston, author, writing instructor, and creator of Eva's newsletter for writers on Substack. Thank you so much for coming along on the ride. Hello, everyone. I am absolutely delighted to bring you today's episode with thriller author Jessica Payne. We'll discuss how she went from piles of rejections to multiple offers, as well as her experience with digital publisher Bookouture and how she got her latest 2-book deal with the Berkeley imprint of Penguin Random House. But before we dive in, I'm going to do some quick begging. This is a brand new show, and I'm trying to get the word out to writers and people interested in learning about publishing. So please, please, please consider subscribing to the podcast, telling your friends to subscribe, and if you feel so inclined, take a moment to give The Long Road to Publishing a 5-star rating or a review, because that helps other people find the podcast. You could even pause and do it right now, for example. But in any case, thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot to me. And now on with the episode, which I'm calling From Rejection to Reflection to Publishing Success with Jessica Payne. Today we have Jessica Payne. Jessica is a thriller author who has probably spent a little too much time studying the dark intricacies of the human mind. An expert coffee drinker, she loves to go running to manage the resulting caffeine jolt. Jessica lives in the Pacific Northwest with her husband, daughter, and their many, many cats and dogs. Her next novel, Somebody Worth Killing, is forthcoming from Berkeley Penguin Random House in June 2026. Her other novels include Make Me Disappear, The Lucky One, The Good Doctor, and Never Trust the Husband. Welcome to The Long Road to Publishing.
Thank you, Eva. I'm so excited to be here.
I am really, really excited to talk to you. I have so many questions, but the first one is just how many cats and dogs do you have? Or is it too embarrassing to say?
No, I mean, it's not that bad. I would prefer to have many more than we have, but we are a military family, so we move sometimes. So it can be hard to move that many pets. We did have 5 when we came to home to the Pacific Northwest because this is kind of where we're from these days. Now we're down to 4. We lost one of our poor
Oh,
kitties recently,
oh.
and that was heartbreaking because she was the cat that would sit at my desk with me and keep me company. So just 2 dogs and 2 cats right now, but I am working very hard on growing that. Every day I send my husband photos of cats that need to be adopted, and I'm like, how about this one?
I was going to ask, are you more a cat person or a dog person or equal?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely equal. I love getting outside with my dogs. We're in Washington State, so we go hiking but I also love my cats. I feel like I can connect to my cats better, but it's fun to be active with the dogs. Although our cats walk with us too sometimes,
Oh
which,
my gosh, that's
makes us the
adorable.
weirdos in the neighborhood, but that's okay.
No, no, I love that. Okay, I guess we could talk about cats all day, I'm sure. But I know we're going to get into how you published the 4 thriller novels that are already out, as well as the 2 that are coming out. But for right now, do you want to give us a quick plug on your latest book, which just came out in March, Never Trust the Husband?
Oh, I'd love to. And it actually came out last year in March.
Oh, it came out last March.
I know, I
Okay.
just realized it's been a year, but that's kind of fun because now I have some perspective on it that I can share. Yeah, I'd love to tell you about it. It's kind of half psychological thriller, half domestic suspense. It is told in dual point of view, so you have the perspective of 2 different women. And the first one is Madeline, and she's kind of a little rich girl living in Seattle. She's, an influencer. She has her daddy's money. But you also can't help but kind of feel for her because she's going through all these same emotional things we are. And she has sworn off men, except she finally meets the man that, makes her think, okay, maybe I could fall in love someday. The other perspective is Rebecca. And you learn pretty quickly that something happened to Madeline, that she actually had an accident and was killed in that accident. Rebecca comes to town and she does not think it was an accident. She is sure that it was actually a murder and that either Madeline's new husband or her best friend who always kind of wanted to be her, that one of them is responsible. And to make matters worse, the husband and the best friend are now together and like living in this house that Madeline gifted to her husband as their wedding gift. So Rebecca infiltrates their lives and becomes the best friend's, running BFF and drinks wine with her. She follows the husband when he goes out at night, and she quickly learns that they have secrets of their own. It was a really different book for me to write, and it was really fun, and it's actually the one that has sold the best. And, as an author, you never know what's going to happen. My first book did really well, but my second and third, they did okay. So I was worried I was on this like downward trend. So to have this book do so well was just it made me feel better.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do feel it's kind of like just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Right?
And the things you think that people are going to love, they don't. So I want to backtrack a little bit. A lot of writers say, oh, I've always wanted to be a writer. But when do you feel like you really thought, okay, I'm going to write something and get it published?
Ava, I love this question because I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked, so when did you decide you wanted to become a writer? And I think not for all of us, but almost all of us, it's like, oh, well, I've always kind of written. For me, I remember the exact moment. It was like such a powerful moment for me. I had been writing off and on for years, and then I had a baby when I was 34. It was a pretty rough delivery. There were some like life and death moments there. And I think that having a baby in general makes people, I know this sounds weird. When you give birth to a child, I feel like it makes you think about death because you're also thinking about birth. You realize how fragile life is.
Yes, I
And then
agree.
on top of that, this kind of interesting delivery, we'll say. And I just realized, I'd always wanted to write a book, and it made me realize that it's like any dream, like you just have to go for it. And it might not mean that you have time right now, but will you ever have time? So I remember I was out on a run with a good friend of mine, and I was like, I think I'm going to try writing a book. And she was like, you have a 4-month-old baby. And I was like, I know, but she naps sometimes.
Well, I do feel like when you have kids, suddenly you have less time, but then you, at least for me, you realize how precious that the time is that you have, and so you don't waste it as much.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
feel like I've heard a lot of moms and I guess parents, but moms in particular say they got more efficient with their writing once they had kids, and they're like, I have nap time, and that's all,
Yes,
you
it's
know.
so true.
Yeah, and just I remember when I was pregnant with my second child, I was drafting a novel and I it gave me a really good deadline to be like, I am going to be done with this draft by the time I have the baby. So it does kind of,
Yes.
yeah, put things in perspective, kind of help you with your timing maybe in some ways too.
It kind
So,
of gives you boundaries around them. Like I can write while my daughter's at school, and once she's home, it's over. So I know I have to get it done by, 3 o'clock.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so you had a 4-month-old, you were like, I'm going to write a book, and did you already know that you wanted to write a thriller?
My first two books were actually contemporary fiction novels,
Oh,
but
okay.
this was in 2018. And at that time, for the most part, they were not selling well, which meant that agents were not really signing authors who were writing them. So yeah, my first two books were contemporary fantasies. One was a vampire book, one was a witch book, and they kind of taught me how to write. And of course, at the time, I was very confident. I was sure I was going to get an agent on like my first 5 queries, and they're going to be bestsellers, and everyone was going to love them. But I think we need that false confidence. Well, not false confidence, but we need to feel that way so that we push forward. And now I look back and I can see how, despite being sure they were so good, they were not, that I had a lot of growing to do as an author. But yeah, my first two books were that genre, and then the next book I wrote was my first thriller.
Okay, so you wrote two contemporary fantasies and you
Hmm.
queried them, but didn't get any bites on those. Same, because I remember, writing something and then immediately sending it off to agents and being like, this is great, and it's going to be turned into a movie. And then looking back at it now, I'm like, I think I like read through it like line editing, but I didn't even do
Yeah.
any like major revision on it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's
But
because
yeah,
we don't even understand what revising is at that point. And it's
yeah.
not that the effort's not there or that you don't want to do it. It's that, we grow up editing English papers for high school. And, in high school, that is fixing commas and making sure you don't have spelling problems. So that's what you kind of assume editing a book is about. And I think you need that experience to then be able to figure out, oh, okay, I actually need to rewrite a chapter or change the plot here or in this spot. But yeah, I queried those first two books. I sent out close to 100 queries per book. I luckily, I did know that it was normal to get many, many rejections and that is part of it. And I think that that's one of the hardest parts of querying, especially for someone who doesn't realize how normal that is. I see
Mm-hmm.
so many posts that are like, I sent out 10 or 15 or 20 queries and I haven't heard anything back and it's been 2 weeks. And you're like, oh, I feel for you, but also like this is going to take months. This could take years, and it's probably going to take hundreds of queries and multiple books. And yeah, I mean, I did not get a single request on either of those books.
Oh,
And that
that's
was really hard,
that's
but
hard on the heart.
it was a wake-up call. It made me realize that something I was doing was not working. And I feel like that is a huge part of publishing in general. And the more books I publish, the more I realize that if something's not working, taking an honest look at it and figuring out, okay, what could I be doing differently? What is the market looking like? That can change everything. And I knew that I really enjoyed reading thrillers, so I decided that I was going to figure out how to write one, which was easier said than done because to me it felt almost like magic, the way these authors would create these twists and turns. And I would be like, wait, it's so clear that like that's the bad person in the book, but I never would have guessed. And so figuring out how to do that was a whole thing. But I wrote a third book, and you know what? I got like 20 requests for that book. I went from 0 to
Wow.
20, and I did not get an agent with that book, but I knew that I was getting closer, and that was so, so encouraging. So I took the lessons I learned from that book, and I wrote a book called Make Me Disappear, which ended up being my debut. It's the book that got me my agent, and I got like 25 or 30 requests. I ended up getting multiple agent offers and getting to do phone calls with them and choose which agent I felt was like the best match for me. And I could not have written that fourth book that got me my agent and got me my first publishing deal had I not written and queried the three leading up to it, because querying is a learning process too, and you get
Mm-hmm.
better and better and better.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this so much because I think, somebody else might have said, oh, I've written multiple books and I've queried and nothing and just give up. But it really, like you said, it really is you were learning, you were teaching yourself. And that is incredible that you had 20 or 30 requests and you had multiple agents. So it really does show that you put in the time and I always like to say to myself and others, if you're still trying, you haven't failed. That
I'm going to say that
is,
to my daughter, actually.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so you got your agent for Make Me Disappear, and
Mhm.
then did you work on revisions with your agent? What was the turnaround to when you went on sub?
I think it took about 6 months. We did quite a bit of revising, which is exactly what I wanted. In those multiple offers, I did have one agent who was like, it's good to go as is. We'll just take it on sub. And I remember being like, huh, that's actually really scary to me because I know that it's not as good as it
Mm-hmm.
can be. And I know that I don't have as much experience as, an agent I want to work with. So we spent about 6 months editing it. We looked at character arcs. This book was also dual point of view, so we made sure we really had the voice for each perspective down. And then I actually ended up rewriting the ending to be more in line with my genre.
And so then tell me about your experience with that first book being on submission. I know it can vary wildly from short to long.
Think it didn't last that long, maybe 2 months. We got answers pretty fast. We had a lot of interest right off the bat. And we ended up deciding to go with Bookouture, which is an imprint of Hachette UK.
Okay, so I was looking into this because I had never heard of, and it's Bookouture, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's a digital only imprint, is that right?
It is a digital publisher. So I'll explain a little bit
Yeah,
what that means
explain what that
because
means. Uh-huh.
I had to sort this out too because I was like, the what? The who? So digital publishers have changed over time. At least that is my understanding. Originally, they were called digital first, which meant that they only did ebook first, but that is not how Bookouture functions. Bookouture does focus on digital publishing first and foremost. So they push their ebooks the most. Part of that is because 70% of books are sold on Amazon. We
Mm.
all have our feelings about Amazon, so I'm going to leave that out of this conversation for the time being. But I acknowledge that 70% of books are sold on Amazon. So they primarily focus their efforts there. That said, they also do an audiobook for every book, and they also use print on demand, which
Okay.
allows them to have quicker turnaround and not have a really long lead time. So I have paperbacks for all of my books, and my paperbacks are in bookstores. I find, and I'm sure someone will disagree with me, but I consider digital publishing to be a really nice place that is between, like it pulls in the best parts of self-publishing, but it's a traditional publishing model. And that you have a
Hmm.
publisher. I don't give them any money. All the money flows to me. We go through all the stages of editing like any other publisher, but they do primarily focus on digital sales. And that might mean just outright an ebook sale, or it might be Kindle Unlimited. That is one thing they also utilize, or like Amazon. I think Amazon has its own thing as well.
Hmm.
Um, what this allows for, like some of the positives are that they can be really nimble. Like if they notice that a certain type of book is doing really well in the market, because they don't distribute to regular bookstores, and only do it on Amazon, they can have a book coming out in 3 or 4 months
Oh,
that like
wow. Okay.
follows that trend. And as
Hmm.
an author, that means you can publish more often. So my first and second book came out 4 months apart. I do not recommend doing that. It was exhausting,
That
but
sounds
you
crazy.
could. And some people do. Some people publish every 4 months. I am a fast writer, so I was kind of more or less publishing about every 6 months. It allowed me to build a backlist, and it allows authors to regularly be publishing books. So they're not turning a book in and it's 18 months to publication. That does allow you to build up an income, a fairly
Hmm.
regular income. And they also do a good job of pushing your backlist with each new book that comes out. They also pay quarterly, so you can kind of have a regular income, whereas traditional publishers usually pay twice a year, give or take. They do not do an advance, which some people consider that a downside. At the same time, you don't have an advance that you're trying to earn out,
Hmm.
and everything you make, you keep. They have a higher royalty rate. Bookouture is 45% on ebooks. So it's just kind of a different type of publishing. The downsides are that you don't get an advance. Your books are not widely distributed to bookstores. The bookstores that have my book, it's because I have a personal relationship with them. But I thought it was really good. They did a great job with marketing. The other thing they do that is similar to what a lot of self-publishing authors do is they look at data. They look at what's working. They're going to make sure you have a title and a cover that they believe will help it sell well. The downside is you may not have as much say over your title and cover as you
Mm.
might with a different publisher. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I think it just depends on what you want and what kind of author you are. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed working with them. I would work with them again. Ultimately, I wanted my books in bookstores though. And so I'm excited for what's next.
Yeah. So you had four thrillers come out with Bookouture, is that right?
Yep, I
Yeah,
I
that's
think we did it over
amazing.
the course of about 2 years.
Especially when you were talking about kind of your timeline, I was thinking, how did she do this? Because I know usually when you get a book deal, it can be like pretty much 2 years from when you
Yeah,
sign the contract to when your book comes out. And in this case, in those 2 years, you had four books come out.
yeah.
So that's incredible. Also incredible how fast you're writing these thrillers. I'm guessing that maybe you've gotten quicker over time as you've kind of honed your craft. Do you have thoughts about writing books quickly?
I have many thoughts. So I will say, you have to, if you're going to do something like that, you have to find that line of quantity versus quality. And I felt like at some points I edged up against that. And I didn't like that because I do want to be writing a quality book. I know that I want to read a quality book. Um, and I think as an author, you just have to know what you're capable of. I do generally write fairly fast, so it worked pretty well for me. I did like that faster paced schedule. I do not think it's for everyone. And if you are interested in digital publishing or working with Bookouture, there are some authors who do not publish that fast. So I would encourage people to go at a pace that works for them and that works for their creativity. For me, one of the biggest changes I made is I went from being a total pantser to, I hate this term, plancer,
Uh-huh.
plotting and pantsing together. But I also feel like, I mean, I suspect that would have happened anyway, kind of on my journey of being an author. I have found that I can pants a lot of the stuff in between as long as I know what my big plot beats are. And that at the end, I then am not rewriting the whole book, which I love not rewriting the whole book.
Yeah, that does make a difference. Is like, okay, if I can just do a little bit of planning ahead of time, maybe I won't have to rewrite the entire thing later. Yeah.
Exactly.
Although sometimes that's just you have to do it anyway. I know. And
It's true.
everybody's method is different and like I feel like every book is different and well that is fascinating. And I've been hearing of more smaller publishers going with this model of the like print on demand, which makes sense because you hear about people bookstores having to return books to the warehouse and then they get pulped and destroyed. And it's like, oh
I
my gosh.
know. It's so
So,
sad.
yeah. Oh, and I was going to say, you mentioned that Bookouture doesn't do advances, but then you don't have to worry about earning out your advance. And in case people listening don't know what that means, when an author gets an advance, then the goal is to sell enough books to kind of balance out that advance and then you start making royalties. But I do know that sometimes if an author doesn't earn out their advance, it can be kind of hard to sell their next book because publishers are like, I don't know, you didn't earn out your advance in the last one. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's all of this I think talk about big advances, but it's not always a good thing to have a huge advance. Yeah.
No, I agree. There's definitely a balance.
I know you had mentioned to me that you had two books die on submission. So I don't know if we've gotten to that point in the story.
So I had wanted to continue digital publishing, but also have some books like out in the world, and like with a bigger publisher who does distribute to bookstores. And I wrote two different psychological thrillers, and we took them on sub over the course of, I think like 2 Januaries. And it was really hard. Neither one of them sold. And I guess what I want to say to your listeners about that, because like querying and rejections, I think it helps to normalize that a lot of rejections are normal and that sending a lot of queries is normal. It is also totally normal for a book to not sell on sub. I don't think I know a single author, like truly, I do not think I know anyone who has not had a book die on sub. It is totally normal. And also, I hate to use the word die. I shouldn't have used that because it doesn't mean it's dead. Like I have friends whose debut ended up being their second book they took on sub, and then they sold their first book to be their follow-up. So it doesn't mean that that book is gone, forever, that it will never be published, that you can't sell it to an audiobook publisher or self-publish it at some point. There are still a lot of options out there. But specific to my experience of having two books not sell on sub, it was kind of like having those two contemporary fantasies not get me an agent. I was like, okay, let's reflect. Let's consider, like, okay, what does publishing look like right now? I feel like in the world of publishing, there are almost two kinds of authors. There are the authors who are going to write what they want to write no matter what, and then there are the authors who pay attention to what is working in the market. And I don't think it has to be that way. And I know that there are lots of in-betweens. And what I always seek to do is, okay, what do I want to write that, in our Venn diagram
Mm.
overlaps with what is also selling well? And so I had a conversation with my agent, and we kind of determined that the type of psychological thrillers I was writing, they were still selling, but there had been a significant slowdown. The world
Mhm.
was changing. People wanted something else. People wanted something less dark and more fun, which I still know people selling psychological thrillers. So if you're writing one, that doesn't mean yours won't sell, but what I was writing was not selling. So that was a chance for me to stop and reflect and be like, okay, what do I need to do differently? How do I need to pivot? And that is how I decided to write the next book, which is the book that sold Berkeley.
There's so many things I want to comment on. So first, I think I totally agree that I want everybody to know how normal it is for books to die on submission. I have also had two books die on submission. You are right, though, that they're not always dead. You might sell one book and then go back and see what else you have sitting on the shelf. And so, also, a friend of mine sent me a post the other day from Rochelle Gardner, who's a literary agent. And this was a post she made on Threads. I'll link to it in the show notes. But I'm going to just read it word for word. She says, "Please take these numbers with a grain of salt as they're meant to be explanatory and not perfectly accurate. But a conversation yesterday revealed that an acquiring editor at a publishing house used to get 600 submissions from agents a year, and now they get 1,200. So it has doubled, and they're overwhelmed. This editor typically acquires 4 books a year. It's not hard to see why so many books die in submission. It feels like every published book is a miracle." So, yeah. I mean, I don't want to make people feel, depressed of like, oh, it's never going to happen. That's not my intention. My intention is to be like, look, this is happening to everybody. It's such a numbers game of hitting the right editor at the right time with the right project and when they're in the right mood. And I think you really do have to learn to not take it personally and also do what you did too and pivot. I was reading recently, Emily Henry has 2 YA books that are both lovely, but like nobody knows about them because I
I had no
guess
idea.
yeah, I guess she had started out writing YA and then I don't know if they weren't selling well or they were having trouble selling her next one. And so she pivoted to adult romance and now look at her.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You can't
So
not look at her because she's everywhere.
I think it's both. It's like not taking it personally, keep trying, but also being smart and pivoting when you need to. This is all really, really good advice.
Yeah,
Um,
and I like what you said about it being a numbers game. I well, I still do this YouTube show with a friend of mine, and one time I compared it to dating, and I was like, it's just a matter of going on enough first dates. And I know it's not quite the same. It also needs to be a good book, but I remember just thinking it's a numbers game. There are so many other people out there. It's the right book with the right agent or editor at the right time, and I truly
mhm.
believe that.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Okay, so you had the 2 books die in submission. I'm trying to keep track. And
hmm
then did you wrote something else or did you rework one of those?
Well, I had a conversation with my agent, and we had been talking for a while about me writing a female assassin book. And for a long time, I had wanted to, and I hate that we have to say female assassin, but okay, female assassin. And for a long time, I had wanted to write about a sociopath who was a woman. And for a lot, and that whole time, she was like, I don't know if I can sell that, because the market wasn't quite right. And she was like, Jessica, okay, what do you think about writing the female assassin book? And I was like, okay, I can do that, but I want her to be a mom. And she was like, what? And
Yes.
I was like, yeah, I mean, picture it. Imagine this mom who's like checking her watch because she needs the babysitter to show up so she can go kill this guy by midnight. And anyway, my agent loved it. And that's all I had. I had like a pitch for like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And it was the first time that I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this pitch and turn it into like a query length pitch and then a synopsis. And yeah, and that's what I did. And I wrote first pages and sent them to my agent and we revised them. And it just felt like the book that I was destined to write. And I don't know what that says about me, but but it's been such a fun process. And I I think I was also ready to write something a little bit lighter because my dark psychological thrillers are very dark. And this book has been so much fun. Like it's not like haha funny the whole way through, but there's a lot of dark humor and there's a lot of humor that is just intrinsic, am I using that word right? To being a mom and like some
Hmm.
of the stuff we have to deal with and then to have it be like she's an assassin and even as an assassin, she is still dealing with the same mom stuff that we are.
I love
Um,
that. I love that.
yeah, it's been really fun.
So that is the one that sold to Berkeley.
Yes, I wrote first pages. We worked on a synopsis. We got it all revised within an inch of its life, and we actually sent it out on proposal. And I was terrified because
Wow.
I mean, I'd like done my option on proposal with Bookouture, but I'd never sold a book on proposal. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if it doesn't sell? But it did, and it sold in like 3 weeks. And I was sorry, I'm like stunned even now thinking about it, how it all went down. And I'm working with like a total dream editor, and Berkeley has for a long time been my favorite imprint. I just love what they do with books. I love that they have things that are a little edgy and a little different, and I feel like they are just the perfect publisher to support this book. And even more fun is that it's actually the start of a series. So I've been working on book two, which has been a different type of challenge. I've never written a second book, and it's another learning curve. But I think that that's kind of when the best work comes out is when you're actively learning while you're writing.
That's so interesting. And it just goes to show what a wild ride it is because it's like, normally to sell a novel, you have to have written the whole novel. A nonfiction book can sell on proposal, but usually with the novel, you have to have written the whole thing. But I guess you had proven yourself with your other thriller novels that you had out, so you were able to sell that just with the proposal. Did you ever feel nervous of like, what if I can't write this one, or that wasn't even a concern?
I am pretty good at writing what I set my mind to. And so I had written, by the time we actually took it out, I had gotten up to like the 60 or 70% point of
Oh,
writing it.
okay. Yeah.
And the 40% point is where the magic is for me. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be a book. So I felt good about it. And we spoke with my editor about the synopsis, and she seemed really happy with it. And I had a pitch for a second book. So I felt confident about it at that point.
That is so exciting. And do we have a title of that one yet? Or are you allowed to
So
say?
well, right now we're still calling it Somebody Worth Killing, which
Okay.
is what the announcement was published as, and what we're kind of it's our working title. I don't know if it's what it will publish under, but it will be all over my social media, so it will not be hard
Okay.
to find.
And that one's coming out in June 2026?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's very exciting. And then the sequel will come out sometime later. Yeah,
Yeah, about a
so
year later.
and then your books are going to be in the bookstores.
So, I mean, it should be available widely at pretty much all bookstores. Not all bookstores carry all books, though. So, my understanding is that, so this is one of the differences between digital and more traditional publishing is that traditional publishers like Berkeley, Penguin Random House, they have distributors and they have sales teams. So they talk to these sales teams and they pitch the sales teams. And the people who work on the sales teams are in touch with the actual bookstores, and the booksellers communicate with them. I am originally from Kansas City, and when I was last in Kansas City, they actually were having like a booksellers event at my old local bookstore, which is Rainy Day Books. And it was really cool because I got to actually see them in action. And the booksellers do come in, and or the yes, the sellers
Booksellers.
who work
Yeah.
for the publishers do come in and actually talk to the booksellers who work in the bookstore, and they tell them about all the new books coming out, and they talk about lead titles and the other titles too. And so that will all be on them, is my understanding.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
my editor's spoken to me a little bit about it, like how she also communicates with the sales team. So yeah, it'll be up to them and to the individual bookstores.
That's very exciting. Oh, I know what else I wanted to ask you about is that you mentioned on your Substack that you've also signed on for IP projects and you've worked as a ghostwriter. What has that been like? And also, how are you making time for all of these projects?
I really enjoy doing both. I am someone who enjoys writing for the sake of writing. So to get a job that I get paid for, where I get to try something that is probably totally different than anything I would ever like come up with on my own,
Mhm.
is like a fun challenge. And usually I can work on two projects at once. I do write full time now. So that gives me about 4 to 6 hours of writing time every day. So when I'm working on a second project like that, I'll work on like one in the morning and then switch to one in the afternoon. So my agent hooked me up with those different jobs, and I can't talk a lot about them
Yeah,
because of the
yeah.
nature of them. But if it's something that you as a writer have ever thought about, like I would encourage it. I do think it's easier if you have an agent, and you definitely want someone to like look at your contract and make sure you're getting, a good deal, but it's a great way to make money on the side as an author, and so often our income is unpredictable that
Hmm.
it's a great place to get into. And it's something
Yeah.
that if you're agented, you can certainly ask them about.
And that makes sense that like, you work on your own project and then you have this totally different thing that's someone else's idea, so almost maybe you don't have as much emotional attachment to it and you can
It's
kind of
true.
work on it.
It's true. You
Yeah.
get an outline, and sometimes it's chapter by chapter, and sometimes it's not. But you can just work off of that outline, and you can understand who that person wants this character to be. And it doesn't mean you'll always get it right, but that's what revising is for.
Hmm.
And in a way, it's really fun. It's really powerful to help someone have their vision come
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah. That's cool. It's something I've always been intrigued by, and every now and then I'm
Hmm.
like, "Ooh, maybe I'll try that." And then I get nervous because I've heard there's a really quick turnaround. And as a mom, sometimes your kid suddenly gets sick for a week or.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know, it's in the back of my mind. Maybe one day.
You should look into it. There's also Gotham ghostwriters based out of New York, and it's a whole ghostwriting agency that you can
Oh.
apply to, and they will like message you jobs, and you can always negotiate. So if you
Hmm.
feel like I can't do it in 2 months, but I could do it in three,
Yeah. Well, you may have already told us, because we've definitely heard a lot of your ups and downs, but is there anything we haven't talked about that surprised you on your writing or publishing journey, either a good surprise or a bad surprise?
yes, I'm going to talk about a good surprise.
Okay.
When I was a new writer, I'm gonna call myself a new writer in 2018, when I first started like really writing my books when my daughter was born. When I was a new writer, if you had asked me what an author looked like, and I would have said that they sat alone in their home office all day, every day, and just pecked at their keyboard. What I would not have expected is just the amazing community of writers. And I don't know why. I didn't even I don't know. I didn't expect that. I've made so many amazing writing friends. Like my best friends are my writing friends now. And I know that people say that being an author can be very lonely work, and I'm not going to say there aren't lonely days, but for the most part, I just feel like I'm part of this amazing community. Yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about that.
Well, I know that you started something. Tell me if I'm saying it right. It's like Mom's Writing Club.
Yeah, Mom's Writers Club. I started that group during the pandemic. It was so my husband being in the military, we had just moved to Texas. And like 3 days later, the city shut down. It was the beginning of the shutdown for COVID. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am in a city where I know nobody. We are in a house that we just rented. It's not our home. And I have like, my daughter was probably about 16 months old then. I have this
Oh gosh.
baby, and he was doing a school there, but like they just shifted it to being online. So he was home, but he was working 80 hours a week. Like I
Hmm.
felt so utterly alone. And I remember back when Twitter was called Twitter, it had this amazing writing community. And one day I was like, I wish there was a group like the 5 a.m. Writers Club, but for moms who like have to write during nap time and late at night after the baby's in bed. And I had like 5 followers at the time, but like hundreds and hundreds of people replied to that. So many moms were looking for a community. So I started a group, and we did every other week chats, which still are going. They're over on Blue Sky now, and a couple of my friends are running them now. And then we also started a YouTube channel, which is still over on YouTube. And if you just search for Mom's Writers Club with hashtag at the beginning, you can find it. But it just created this amazing community. And I know so many people who I now have like met in person, and I know their children, and our kids play together. And it all started from that group on Twitter.
I think you're right that on various social media, it's sad that Twitter is not what it used to be, but on
Yeah.
so many other social media platforms, there's such a strong, supportive writing community. I see it on Substack, which I think is how
I
we
know.
connected.
Yes.
And I have to do more on Blue Sky. I haven't really gotten into it over there, but and Instagram I know has a solid writing community, but yeah, I think overall writers are so supportive of each other. Yes, there is like time when you're by yourself. I mean, I don't know about you personally. I like to write when like no one else is even in the house. Like it's like
No,
I
true. Me too.
can't even have my husband in the other room. Like no, I gotta be alone.
I'm the
Um,
same way. The only ones allowed in are my dogs and cats, but they don't
yes,
talk, so it's
my
okay.
cats are actually you can't see them, but they're like right back over
Are
there.
they hanging
Yeah.
out with you?
But yeah, but you don't really have to be alone because there is that community you can tap into for support. So
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm glad to hear that your club is still going and it's like taken off a life of its own. So that's awesome. Okay, well we're kind of wrapping things up. So I wanted to ask you. I end every podcast with a tip for the road. So what tip do you have for our listeners? And it can be about writing or querying or surviving rejection or anything else.
I have thought a lot about this question because you were kind enough to send me this question in advance. And I think one thing that has really benefited me is is taking the time to learn about publishing. And that might mean listening to this podcast. It might mean being on Substack. It might mean reading Jane Friedman's newsletter, which I think is now called The Bottom Line. It used to be called The Hot Sheet, or her book, or Courtney Mom's book. But basically, learning about publishing as a whole, learning what is normal, knowing that it's normal to get 100 rejections on your queries and that it's normal to have a book die on sub. Because I think that lets you know that what you're going through is normal and that it's not about you and it's not that your book is bad. And I think it also just puts you in a position to make better decisions about your career that will
Mm-hmm.
hopefully enable you to have a long writing life. I think so many of us are kind of like, oh, I'm the author, my agent can handle that. And I mean, I have a great agent. My agent could handle it, but I also like to know what's going on. And I think from those early days of just educating myself about what was normal in the querying trenches to now kind of having a vague idea of how publishing contracts work, that has really benefited me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Jane Friedman is a great resource. We're actually going to have Courtney Mom on the show, and she's the author of Before and After the Book Deal, which is
Yeah.
an incredible book. Yeah, well, I think that's a great tip. And thank you so much for being here. This has been amazing. I feel like I've learned a lot from you just in this episode, and hopefully our listeners have too.
Yeah. Well,
Can
thank you
you,
for having me.
yes, of course. Can you let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yes, my website is Jessica Payne, PAYNE.net. I'm also over on Substack, also at Jessica Payne, and I'm on Instagram as well. I'm pretty easy to find, but my website links to all of those.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody will find you and read your books and look for your new ones. They all sound amazing.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, thank you so much again. Thanks again for listening to The Long Road to Publishing, produced and edited by me, Eva Langston. A big thanks goes out to Allison Ayres, who was my first listener for this episode, and the intro and outro music comes from the artist's sound roll on Upbeat. You can find me online on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack with the handle Eva Langston. Even better, find my newsletter for writers at evalangston.substack.com and feel free to send me an email. The podcast address is longroad.pub@gmail.com. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and I'll be back soon with more stories about the long and winding path to publishing and more tips for the road.